Thank you. Thank President Biden. And thank you to the American people for your incredible support for Israel in our war against the barbarians of Hamas. I thank you in English. I want to thank you in Hebrew as well. אני רוצה להודות למזכיר המדינה בלינקן.
I would like to thank Blinken, Secretary of State, to the President of the United States and to the American people for their support towards our struggle against the Hamas barbarians. Mr. Secretary, you have come here to a people that's hurting, fighting, a people of lions, determined to overcome the powers of evil around it. We hear the horrific stories and the stories of resilience. The horror says everything about them, and the bravery stories say everything about us, and this bravery will overcome.
Mr. Secretary, your visit is another tangible example of America's unequivocal support for Israel. Hamas has shown itself to be an enemy of civilization. The massacring of young people in an outdoor music festival, the butchering of entire families, the murder of parents in front of their children and the murder of children in front of their parents, the burning of people alive, the beheadings, the kidnappings of a young boy, not only kidnapped, molested, hurt, attacked, and the sickening display of celebrating these horrors, the celebration and glorification of evil. President Biden was absolutely correct in calling this sheer evil. Hamas is ISIS, and just as ISIS was crushed, so too will Hamas be crushed. And Hamas should be treated exactly the way ISIS was treated. They should be spit out from the community of nations. No leader should meet them. No country should harbor them. And those that do should be sanctioned. Tony, my friend, I say to you, I say to all of us, there will be many difficult days ahead. But I have no doubt that the forces of civilization will win. And the reason that's true is because we understand what is the first prerequisite of victory. It's what you just said in our meeting. Moral clarity. This is a time, a particular time, a special time, that we must stand tall, proud, and united against evil. Tony, you are taking that stand. America is taking that stand. Thank you for being here today. Thank you, America, for standing with Israel today, tomorrow, and always.
Mr. Prime Minister, I'm grateful to be back in Israel in this incredibly difficult moment for this nation, but in fact, for the entire world. If you'll permit me, personal aside, I come before you not only as the United States Secretary of State, but also as a Jew. My grandfather, Maurice Blinken, fled pogroms in Russia. My stepfather, Samuel Pizar, survived concentration camps, Auschwitz, Dachau, Majdanek. So Prime Minister, I understand on a personal level the harrowing echoes that Hamas's massacres carry for Israeli Jews, indeed, for Jews everywhere. I also come before you as a husband and father of young children. It's impossible for me to look at the photos of families killed, such as the mother, father, and 3 small children murdered as they sheltered in their home in kibbutz near Oz, and not think of my own children. This was just one of Hamas's countless acts of terror. In a litany of brutality and inhumanity that, yes, brings to mind the worst of ISIS. Babies slaughtered, bodies desecrated, young people burned alive, women raped, parents executed in front of their children, children in front of their parents. How are we even to understand this, to digest this? And yet, at the same time that we've been shocked by the depravity of Hamas, we've also been inspired by the bravery of Israel's citizens. The grandfather who drove over an hour to a kibbutz under siege, armed only with a pistol, and rescued his kids and grandkids. The mother who died shielding her teenage son with her body, giving her life to save his, giving him life for a second time. The volunteer security teams on the kibbutzes who swiftly rallied to defend their friends and neighbors despite being heavily outnumbered. And we're lifted by the remarkable solidarity of the Israeli people, demonstrated in the long lines of people giving blood, in the hundreds of thousands of reservists who've mobilized, some rushing home from abroad, people around the country opening their homes to fellow citizens displaced from the south. The people of Israel have long and rightly prided themselves on their self-reliance, on their ability to defend themselves, even when the odds are stacked against them. The message that I bring, even when the odds are stacked, the message that I bring to Israel is this: you may be strong enough on your own to defend yourself, but as long as America exists, you will never ever have to. We will always be there by your side. That's the message that President Biden delivered to the Prime Minister from the moment this crisis began. It's the message that I and my other colleagues in the government have delivered to our Israeli counterparts on a daily, even an hourly basis. It's the message that I bring with me to our discussions today, and it's what I'll affirm when I meet with the members of Israel's newly formed national emergency government. We welcome the government's creation and the unity and resolve that it reflects across Israel's society. We're delivering on our word, supplying ammunition, interceptors, to replenish Israel's Iron Dome, alongside other defense materiel. First shipments of U.S. military support have already arrived in Israel, and more is on the way. As Israel's defense needs evolve, we will work with Congress to make sure that they're met. And I can tell you, there is overwhelming bipartisan support in our Congress for Israel's security. Here in Israel and everywhere, we will reaffirm the crystal clear warning that President Biden issued yesterday to any adversary, state or non-state, thinking of taking advantage of the current crisis to attack Israel. Don't. The United States has Israel's back. We've deployed the world's largest aircraft carrier to the Eastern Mediterranean. We bolstered the presence of U.S. fighter aircraft in the region. We're providing other support as well. We continue working closely with Israel to secure the release of the men, women, children, elderly people taken hostage by Hamas. We're pursuing intensive diplomacy throughout the region to prevent the conflict from spreading, and I'll be doing that over the course of my trip in the coming days. Too often in the past, Leaders have equivocated in the face of terrorist attacks against Israel and its people. That's why we've been adamant with all countries in the wake of these attacks. There is no excuse. There is no justification for these atrocities. You heard the Prime Minister say it. This must be a moment for moral clarity. The failure to unambiguously condemn terrorism puts at risk not only people in Israel, but people everywhere. Look at what just happened. Individuals from 36 countries killed or missing in the aftermath of Hamas's attacks. Europe, Asia, Africa, the Americas. No region has escaped Hamas's bloody reach. Anyone who wants peace and justice must condemn Hamas's reign of terror. We know Hamas doesn't represent the Palestinian people or their legitimate aspirations to live with equal measures of security, freedom, justice, opportunity, and dignity. We know Hamas, instead of promoting the well-being of its citizens, rules repressively and dedicates the resources it has to terror tunnels and rockets. We know Hamas didn't commit its heinous acts with the interests of Palestinian people in mind. We know Hamas does not stand for the future that Palestinians want for themselves and for their children. Hamas has only one agenda: to destroy Israel and to murder Jews. No country can or would tolerate the slaughter of its citizens, or simply return to the conditions that allowed it to take place. Israel has the right, indeed the obligation, to defend itself and to ensure that this never happens again. As the Prime Minister and I discussed, how Israel does this matters. We democracies distinguish ourselves from terrorists by striving for a different standard, even when it's difficult, and holding ourselves to account when we fall short. Our humanity, the value that we place on human life and human dignity, that's what makes us who we are. And we count them among our greatest strength. That's why it's so important to take every possible precaution to avoid harming civilians. And that's why we mourn the loss of every innocent life. Civilians of every faith, every nationality who've been killed. Tragically, the number of innocent lives claimed by Hamas's heinous attacks continues to rise. Among those, we now know that at least 25 American citizens were killed. We joined families in Israel, in the United States, around the world, in mourning their immeasurable loss. Nearly 15 years ago, my stepfather, who I alluded to earlier, Samuel Pizar, came here to Yad Vashem to perform the mourner's prayer that he wrote to accompany Leonard Bernstein's Third Symphony, Kaddish. Reflecting on the unspeakable horrors that he'd endured as a boy in the Nazi concentration camps, he wrote that man, though created in your image and endowed with the freedom to choose between good and evil, remains capable of the worst as of the best, of hatred as of love, of madness as of genius. In this moment, where evil, hatred, and madness have once more taken so many innocent lives, we must stand together, resolved to confront what is worst among humanity with what is best. We must provide an alternative to the vision of violence and fear, nihilism and terror presented by Hamas. That is what the United States will do, standing with Israel, working together with its people, and all those in this region who remain committed to the vision of a more peaceful, a more integrated, a more secure, a more prosperous Middle East. Thank you very much.
You're watching DW News. You've been watching U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken giving a press conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We heard a very strong message coming from the U.S. Secretary of State. The United States has Israel's back. Shani Rosanes is here with me in the studio, Middle East analyst. Shani, I mean, that message certainly resounded. You saw the two with the double handshake, and that really seemed to say it all.
Very friendly, very warm, calling each other friends, talking about the unbreakable bond between the two countries. This is what we've anticipated. We've seen Biden and now Blinken reinforcing this message again and again. I want to point out several things that we need to notice. First of all, you see Netanyahu's rhetoric. There's very clear attempt to connect Hezbollah to ISIS, to the atrocities made by them. It's also something being backed by Blinken itself. It's part of the war on the world stage and, you know, understanding, trying to gain more time to push back criticism on Israel in trying to establish this attack and the crimes connected to it to something unprecedented in brutality and viciousness. Two important other issues that we see. First of all, he was hinting that he is going to try and reach out to other countries in the region for diplomatic efforts. Hint, hint, he is probably aiming at the Saudis, at other, this is not the statements that we heard so far of support, this could be a Republican administration, but the Democratic side here is talking about, let's find a diplomatic solution, let's find another way. He is also reaching out to the Palestinians saying, we don't think Hamas is your representative, we think you deserve more than that. And it seems like this is also something that the Americans are trying to do to keep pushing Netanyahu into finding solutions, diplomatic solutions, to the day after.
So what do you think we could now see in the coming days as Blinken continues his diplomatic tour? Because we know that he's going to meet with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas on Friday. He continues on from there.
Correct.
What are the messages, you think, which are being delivered
he's telling Israel,
in these rooms
he's telling
confidentially?
Israel, you have our backs in fighting. You can do this. You can fight that. Please try not to overstep the borders, saying, you know, making sure that he talks about what brings us together is the values of democracy, our values to human life and dignity, sort of saying, Israel, you need to do your thing. We know that. We got your back. We give you a lot of support. We give you artillery. We give you our carrier in the shores of the Middle East. But at the same time, we expect from you some sort of restraint. And we want, in the end of this, to be able to come out with some breakthrough on a diplomatic level, some other solution that is not only army and force-based. This is what he's hinting at.
He talked about the hostage situation as well. He mentioned efforts that were underway there. What more do we know about that, Shani?
Not much, actually, and it's being kept under wraps on purpose. You know, Israel is very careful also, the Americans, in not leveraging that, in not making it a very big, strong point for Hamas, because the scenes that we've seen and the potential of the psychological and emotional damage Hamas has in hand with having these hostages and then phone numbers, and therefore their phone numbers of all their beloved ones. We've already been hearing about reports of Hamas using these phones to call directly the families of the hostages. So that's psychological warfare that we're seeing there, you know. It's going to make everything very complicated for Netanyahu because he wants to ignore it in his attempt to find a military solution in Gaza, but then at the same time, the public outcry in Israel is going to be very big. So he is going to have to tread the line very carefully, trying to find, or at least make sure that there is some backup of some other solution. It is not necessarily a military one.
It's thought that Israel is preparing a ground incursion in Gaza. What do you think was said from Antony Blinken with regard to Netanyahu? Because, I mean, there have been calls, among others, warning against collective punishment, for example.
Correct, and we see Netanyahu...
Millions of civilians there.
Correct, and we see Blinken talk about that, about, the values of adhering to international rule of law, adhering to the fundamental values that connect the two societies, the Israeli and American, in the sense of respect to human lives, human dignity. But then at the same time, the Americans are still arming Israel quite heavily and bringing that support. I think it's really about trying to find a very delicate balance there of letting Israel do its thing, but then at the same time, trying to set some borders to it.
DW, Shani Rosanes, thank you so much for putting this conversation, this visit from the U.S. Secretary of State to Israel, to the region, into context for us. We really appreciate it. You're watching DW News here in Berlin. Let's bring you up to date with some other aspects of what is going on in the region. And we're going to tell you that Israel says that there has been no humanitarian break to the siege of Gaza, meantime, until all Israeli hostages are freed. Gaza is lacking electricity after its only power station ran out of fuel. Many of the hundreds of thousands of displaced people in Gaza are seeking help from the United Nations. DW News visited a family of one of the United Nations facilities where assistance is certain to be stretched to the limit in the coming days.
They are 13 in all, Umhani Al-Gula and her immediate family. They've found a degree of safety at a UN-run school not far from the Egyptian border.
On the first day of the war, we saw missiles flying over our heads. Our neighborhood is dangerous. It's on the eastern side. We were afraid to stay home. God knows how we got out. But we escaped. Our circumstances are difficult. This is not a solution. The children need milk and diapers. UNRWA can't offer us anything. This is our fourth day at the school. I have high blood pressure and diabetes, and I can't get medication.
Hundreds of thousands have fled like Umhani Al-Gula's family. Most, but not all, before their homes and neighborhoods were reduced to rubble. Israel is retaliating for the cross-border terrorist attacks and hostage-taking by Hamas. The Israeli Defense Forces say they are focused on Hamas-related targets. UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, is providing shelter in spaces like this. It's tight and getting tighter. But for Umhani Al-Gula's family, it seems safer than their home.
There are large numbers of Palestinians in UNRWA schools. We provide them with healthcare, food, we provide clean water, and also psychological support. But the numbers are growing hugely. UNRWA's capacity is for 150,000 displaced Palestinians, and beyond that, it is a big problem, a financial problem, a problem with absorbing all of these people. There is also the problem of the people needed to help them.
Beyond the limited space in the UN displacement centers, each of them is impacted by Israel's complete siege of the Gaza Strip. It's cut off food, water, medicines, and electricity.
We were living in a safe place. The war broke out, the strikes began without warning, and we were forced to leave. We walked about 7 kilometres until we arrived here, hoping to find a safe place. It's not like that here. And this is not suitable for living. There is no water, no food. The sewage system is broken. It's not suitable for living.
Umhani Al-Gula and her family will have to get by in a 6-meter wide room as they wait for an end to what could become a drawn-out siege and war.
Earlier, I spoke with Hazem Balusha, a journalist based in Gaza. He told me what he's seeing there.
The bombardment is continuous, non-stop, day and night. It's more intense in some areas, mainly now in Gaza City, where I am staying. There is the 2 areas are under intense airstrikes and apparently artillery shelling. It's called the Mukhabarat and General Security al-Karama. These areas, like they are rifled. There are many reports from people there or nearby tell that they are under severe and very intense bombardment and airstrikes. Many people left their places. Some of them, they rushed to a hotel nearby, and thousands of these people are staying in the ground floor. No ambulances are allowed to access to this area as it's very intense under the strikes. The situation for all the other Strip is not only limited to that. There is no electricity. People sometimes they have little of that on public, or like there is generators. People subscribe to it, but those generators, they many of it like run out of the fuel.